You have the right to remain silent.
What if the very man who built a global wrestling empire and even made himself the villain in the story now finds himself on the wrong side of the law? In the stunning turn of events, Vince, the chairman McMahon, is facing federal arrest on serious allegations of sexual misconduct covering decades of abuse and alleged trafficking. The headlines say it all. A powerhouse once untouchable, now confronting the legal system he once mocked. In today's video, we'll peel back the curtain on the investigation that threatens to topple the legacy of a figure who blurred the line between myth and reality. From the alleged cover-ups that kept him in the spotlight for years to the shocking evidence that finally caught up with him, we'll examine how an empire built on secrets is crumbling under the weight of its own sins. Stay tuned, because the story of Vince McMahon's arrest isn't just about a wrestler's downfall. It's a wake-up call for an industry that has long been playing a dangerous game of hide-and-seek. Let's dive into the rabbit hole and see what lies ahead for the man whose name became synonymous with power and now, maybe, with downfall. Vince McMahon, a name that once echoed through arenas and living rooms alike, now faces a storm that threatens to collapse the empire he has meticulously built over decades. Imagine a man whose public persona has always been larger than life, a creator of drama and spectacle, whose very image was shaped by the villain he portrayed on television. It is astonishing, almost absurd, to think that the same person could walk into the spotlight as a character so morally ambiguous that fans could no longer tell where the fiction ended and the real person began. This blurred line between performance and reality has fueled a narrative that feels less like entertainment and more like a psychological maze. Fans have been navigating this maze for years, witnessing storylines that gradually grew uncomfortable, that seemed to reflect an unsettling truth. The very boundary between the show and the off-screen life was eroding. One of the most chilling examples of this erosion took place in the mid-2000s when Vince introduced a storyline that involved his own daughter, Stephanie McMahon, and her husband, the wrestler known as Triple H. This was not a fabricated plot. It involved the real family. Stephanie and Triple H were expecting a child at the time, and the storyline threatened to place that unborn child in a context that was wildly inappropriate and deeply personal. Their refusal was met not with understanding, but with an alternate proposition. What if his son, Shane McMahon, was the father? Vince did not simply accept their stance. He pivoted, keeping the incestuous angle alive in promotional materials and backstage segments. The pattern was clear. Boundaries were treated as hurdles to be negotiated, not respected. His insistence that this was merely entertainment, that it was part of the show, revealed a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He broadcasted these uncomfortable lines to millions, confident that the profit and ratings would eclipse any moral cost. This was not a single lapse in judgment, but a window into a mindset that prioritized creative vision over propriety, that viewed the well-being of others as secondary. Decades of alleged misconduct, spanning from the 1980s to 2022, reveal a trajectory of sexual harassment, assault, trafficking, and systematic cover-ups. Non-disclosure agreements and multi-million-dollar settlements were used as weapons to silence the voices that could expose him. Yet the FBI's interest in Vince McMahon was not a new phenomenon. In 1994, Operation Piledriver unfolded, a joint investigation by the FBI and DEA into anabolic steroid distribution across the professional wrestling industry. Vince was indicted on multiple felony counts, accused of orchestrating a system, an alleged juice machine that compelled wrestlers to use steroids to maintain the visual appeal necessary for television. Though the trial lasted only 3 weeks, with testimonies from wrestling legends such as Hulk Hogan, Vince was acquitted on all counts. The trial, however, laid bare a culture within WWE that was willing to sacrifice legality, ethics, and human well-being for the sake of entertainment and profit. Wrestlers testified about the immense pressure to use performance-enhancing drugs, the toll it took on their bodies, and the sense that Vince could evade the legal consequences that others could not. For nearly 3 decades, the narrative of when the Wall Street Journal uncovered a hidden payment of $3 million that Vince had made to a former employee with whom he allegedly had an affair. This was not merely a salacious personal detail. It violated WWE's disclosure requirements and hinted at a broader pattern of using corporate resources to shield himself and the company from liability. 2 days after the report broke, Vince stepped down as chairman and CEO. Yet he retained his controlling stake, preserving his ability to steer the company from behind the scenes. By January 2023, he had maneuvered back onto the board of directors, a move that underscored his mastery of corporate power dynamics. The $3 million payment was merely the tip of the iceberg. Journalists dug deeper and revealed hush money payments totaling over $12 million to multiple women over the years, each aimed at silencing allegations of sexual misconduct and protecting both Vince and WWE from public scrutiny and legal repercussions. The Securities and Exchange Commission's mechanisms, designed to enforce corporate transparency, had failed to hold him accountable. Despite the mounting evidence, Vince maintained his innocence, dismissing the allegations as lies and distortions. He continued to wield significant influence over WWE and its parent company, TKO Group Holdings, formed through a merger with UFC in 2023. The merger brought
in excess of 90 miles per hour.
The police report said McMahon collided with the back of a
heightened scrutiny, as TKO explicitly warned investors in SEC filings that Vince's presence on the board could expose the company to negative publicity and adverse financial and operational impacts. These warnings triggered a renewed FBI investigation, this time focusing on far graver charges: sexual assault, trafficking, and a cover-up that reached the highest levels of one of America's most recognizable entertainment companies. The lawsuit that shifted the tide arrived on January 25, 2024. A former WWE employee named Janelle Grant filed a federal lawsuit that went beyond a standard settlement negotiation. She chose to be publicly identified, a courageous decision given the explicit and deeply disturbing nature of her allegations. The complaint, spanning 67 pages, read less like a civil suit and more like a criminal indictment. It detailed years of alleged sexual abuse, trafficking, and psychological manipulation that Grant claimed destroyed her life. According to the lawsuit, Grant met Vince in 2019 while they lived in the same building in Connecticut. At that time, she was a full-time caregiver for both of her parents who had recently died, and the family home had been lost in a bankruptcy. She was grieving, financially strained, and emotionally devastated. Vince, according to the complaint, befriended her during this vulnerable period, offering support and eventually promising her a role within the company. The lawsuit paints a harrowing picture of a man who leveraged his power and position to exploit a woman already in a state of distress. Ultimately, these revelations have shaken Vince McMahon's narrative, once one of relentless ambition and visionary storytelling, has been rewritten in headlines, court filings, and public discourse. The story is no longer about a charismatic showman who built an empire. It is now about a man whose unchecked power facilitated a series of crimes that spanned decades deeper, uncovering whether the allegations of sexual assault and trafficking were merely isolates that permeated WWE's operations. As the legal process unfolds, the entertainment world watches, and the question remains: can an institution built on illusion endure when its creators' actions are brought to light? Vince McMahon's promise of a fresh start for Janelle Grant was, from the outset, shrouded in a web of coercion. When the two met in 2019, Grant was still grieving the loss of her parents and the collapse of their home. McMahon, sensing her vulnerability, offered her a role that could have stabilized her life. Yet every opportunity came with a hidden clause: a sexual relationship with him. From the first encounter, the pattern of abuse began. McMahon greeted Grant in his underwear at his condominium, pulled her close, and shared intimate details about his personal life. What seemed like affectionate teasing quickly turned into explicit demands. Grant felt trapped. The prospect of employment loomed as the only viable escape from her financial distress. He told her that any professional chance at WWE hinged on that intimate relationship. She complied, knowing her future rested on his approval. The position McMahon fabricated for her, an administrative coordinator in the legal department, was designed not for legitimate work, but for constant accessibility. Once she was inside WWE, he transferred her to the Talent Relations Department, headed by John Laurinaitis, a former wrestler and executive who would later be named as a co-defendant. In that new role, the allegations intensified. Grant testified that McMahon and Laurinaitis would hold her down, assault her, and force her to perform acts at WWE headquarters before, during, and after work. The abuse was relentless, and it extended beyond McMahon himself. He allegedly shared explicit photos and videos of Grant with other men, both inside and outside WWE, turning her into a pawn in a broader scheme of sexual exploitation. The horror of the alleged acts is illustrated in a single brutal incident. On May 9, 2020, during a threesome that McMahon orchestrated, he defecated on Grant's head, then instructed her to continue the encounter with a third person, McMahon's personal physical therapist. This episode, among others, paints a picture of trafficking, the systematic procurement of a vulnerable individual for sexual servitude. The lawsuit calls attention to how Grant was expected to perform sexual acts at all times, a stark departure from any workplace standard. Physically and psychologically, Grant suffered devastating consequences. Panic attacks, sleep disruption, dizziness, exhaustion, rashes, weight loss, hair loss, and severe migraines became part of her daily reality. When she confided in her doctor about trauma and stress, McMahon denied her the right to seek independent medical care. Instead, he insisted she see a physician of his choosing, someone who could provide an assessment that would not jeopardize his position or expose the alleged misconduct. The most damning element of the lawsuit was the pressure to sign a non-disclosure agreement. In a desperate bid to silence her, McMahon threatened to revoke the hush money payments he had promised. Grant's legal team argues that the NDA was signed under duress and that its invalidation, along with punitive damages aimed at deterring similar future conduct. Around the same time, federal investigators were building a case of their own warrant at McKinn's Connecticut residence. Agents targeted any evidence, financial records, text messages, emails, that could demonstrate McMahon's systematic cover-up of hush money payments. They focused on how these payments were structured and whether corporate records had been falsified, potentially constituting fraud. The FBI also examined whether the payments violated federal financial reporting requirements. The investigation's core lies in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. The same statute that Janelle Grant invoked in her civil suit was being applied by federal agents to evaluate the alleged trafficking. The FBI believed that McMahon's actions could meet the statutory definition of human trafficking, involving the procurement of a vulnerable individual for sexual acts in exchange for material benefit. If proven, the penalties under this law mirror those used against international trafficking rings, underscoring the gravity of the accusations. These federal concerns, fraudulent corporate records, misstructured payments, and alleged violations of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act coalesced into a comprehensive case against McMahon. The search of his Connecticut home yielded text-based communications and financial documents that could corroborate the lawsuit's claims. Agents were keen on finding evidence that McMahon had deliberately evaded company audits and internal controls, effectively creating a clandestine network to shield the hush money payments from scrutiny. In the public eye, the lawsuit's release amplified the FBI's efforts. The Wall Journal's coverage of the lawsuit's details sent shockwaves through WWE, the wrestling industry, and corporate America alike. The very same investigation had been underway for months. The lawsuit's timing accelerated the FBI's focus on McMahon's alleged criminal conduct, but the groundwork had already been laid. The federal charges now encompass not only potential fraud, but also severe trafficking allegations, which carry the most serious penalties. For WWE, this unfolding saga is a reckoning. The company's culture, long celebrated for spectacle and entertainment value, is now being held accountable for the safety and well-being of its employees. Grant's quest for justice may well spark a watershed moment, compelling the industry to confront decades of systemic abuse and to institute genuine protections for those within its ranks. In the wake of the lawsuit's public release and the FBI's heightened scrutiny, Vince McMahon's arrest loomed as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked power. The wrestling world's once iconic figure now faces an indictment that could permanently alter his legacy and perhaps forever change the narrative surrounding those who once sought refuge in his arena. In February 2025, a headline announced that the Department of Justice had decided not to bring criminal charges related to the alleged cover-up of the hush money scheme. Prosecutors cited insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that records had been deliberately falsified or that payments were structured in a manner that violated federal law. The decision was framed as a procedural setback, but it carried no final judgment on the underlying allegations. What the ruling did not alter was the continuing focus on the trafficking claims. The DOJ's choice to pause the cover-up case does not erase the possibility of future charges that could stem from the same documents. In fact, the absence of a criminal indictment has not discouraged investigators. Instead, it has sharpened their scrutiny of the surviving evidence. One of the key figures in the civil lawsuit, John Laurinaitis, has reportedly entered into a cooperation agreement with federal agents. His willingness to testify and to provide emails, text messages, and financial records signals that prosecutors believe they can build a stronger case against Vince McMahon himself. When a co-defendant offers testimony, it can plant doubt in the mind of a single juror, and more importantly, it can create a web of corroboration that strengthens the prosecution's narrative. Meanwhile, the fallout for WWE has multiplied. Immediately after the lawsuit's publication in January 2024, Slim Jim withdrew its sponsorship of the Royal Rumble event. That same week, executives from TKO Group Holdings, Mark Hero and Area Man, urged McMahon to resign from the board. He complied, releasing a statement that framed his departure as a gesture of respect toward the WWE Universe while denying any wrongdoing. He called the allegations lies and portrayed himself as a victim of a vindictive distortion of truth. In the public eye, the narrative is split. On one side, McMahon remains a free man, still reaping financial benefits from WWE's success and wielding influence that could protect him from a long legal battle. On the other, his legal team has been relentless in pushing back. Their strategy is threefold. First, they deny any impropriety. Second, they attack the credibility of the accusers. Third, they argue that if any sexual relationship existed, it was consensual and that the NDA should bar any public disclosure. The defense team frequently points to flirtatious or seemingly innocent text exchanges, framing them as harmless banter between adults. They claim that the legal and corporate context of WWE, where performers routinely trade gossip, storylines, and trade secrets, could explain the messaging that witnesses now interpret as coercive. Yet, the NDAs and hush money payments complicate that narrative. Even if a single exchange looks harmless on its own, the pattern of agreements that followed suggests a systematic approach to silence. This pattern becomes more evident when one looks beyond Janelle Grant. The civil case's discovery files contain references to several other women who were allegedly approached, trafficked, and then paid to keep quiet. Each of these cases was resolved with a settlement, each sealed by a powerful NDA. The sheer number of victims, the breadth of the settlements, and the consistency of the documentation create a chilling portrait of a culture that prioritized profitability over safety. WWE's image as a cultural institution, one that provides role models and thrilling spectacle, has been shaken by these revelations. Forced to confront the possibility that the cruelty they admired might have been a reflection of real, off-screen abuse. Wrestlers who grew up under the company's banner find them loyalty to a brand that has become both a public conversation also underscores the difficulty for ordinary people to challenge the powerful. Even with documents and witnesses, the legal system demands a meticulous examination. In the civil case has already revealed inconsistencies. Yet the pattern of behavior, repeated hush-money settlements, NDAs that silence testimony, and a corporate culture that tolerates exploitation remains a compelling argument. Within the FBI's office, investigators continue to sift through the digital trail left by McMahon and his associates. The same emails that the DOJ deemed insufficient for the cover-up case may, when examined through a trafficking lens, paint a different picture. The discovery of John Laurinaitis' cooperation further implies that the evidence is far from closed. Even if the criminal path stalls, the civil lawsuit and ongoing federal inquiry keep the pressure on. For WWE, the challenge is dual. The company must maintain its entertainment output and global fan engagement while simultaneously distancing itself from its founders' alleged misconduct. This has led to a careful rebranding effort, public statements of commitment to safety and well-being, and a renewed focus on compliance. Yet the empire he built, one that thrives on spectacle, nostalgia, and brand loyalty, continues to generate revenue that McMahon has helped shape. The story remains unfinished. Vince McMahon's presumption of innocence and right to a fair trial are unassailable. Yet the cumulative evidence that has surfaced, NDAs, settlements, financial records, and witness testimonies, forces a broader reckoning. Whether the legal system ultimately finds him guilty or whether he emerges unscathed, the tide has shifted. The era where a single figure could use powerful contracts to bury decades of alleged misconduct appears to have ended. In the meantime, Janelle Grant's courage is being tested. She endures cross-examination, her past and her trauma being dissected in courtrooms that are both intimate and public. Her lawsuit remains a living, breathing process that will either bring closure or continue to raise questions. The FBI's investigation, the civil case, the corporate backlash, and the ongoing public discourse together form a new kind of accountability. For the first time in decades, the man who once controlled the wrestling world's narrative is being confronted in both court and headlines. The verdict, whether criminal conviction, civil judgment, or a middle ground, remains uncertain. But the conversation it has sparked is undeniable. Patterns of abuse cannot be ignored, and the legacy built on hush money and NDAs is now under the microscope. The era of silent retribution is over, and the wrestling world must confront what it means to operate under the weight of those revelations. Janelle Grant's testimony, once a quiet whisper behind glass, now reverberates through every corner of the wrestling world. As she recites each painful memory, the courtroom's hush grows heavier, a tangible reminder that the weight of the past refuses to be silenced. An audible affirmation that the revelations are not mere allegations, but a living, breathing record of abuse. The FBI's investigation takes a decisive turn when a digital audit of the company's internal communications reveals a hidden archive of emails that the Department of Justice, on closer inspection, resemble a covert system designed to protect the company's public image at the expense of its performers. The language, terms like protect brand integrity and manage stakeholder perception, suggests a premeditated effort to suppress dissenting voices and maintain a facade of invincibility. The fact that these correspondences are dated in the same years as several high-profile settlements underscores the systemic nature of the culture of silence. Meanwhile, WWE's Internal Review Board, convened after the first wave of public outcry, has begun to implement sweeping changes. Mandatory safety training modules have been introduced for all talent, with a focus on psychological well-being alongside physical health. a newly formed compliance office now reports directly to the board, independent from creative and talent relations divisions. The company has publicly announced the establishment of a confidential hotline that offers performers a safe space to voice concerns without fear of retribution or contractual penalties. This shift, however, does not erase the fact that the infrastructure enabling abuse was in place for decades, and the question remains whether these new measures are merely performative or a genuine attempt at transformation. Social media, once the platform where fans celebrated the bravado of wrestlers, has become a battleground of outrage and support. Hashtags like Justice for Janelle and WWE Reform trend across networks, drawing attention from both the wrestling community and mainstream media. Commentators dissect every new piece of evidence, and influencers in the broader entertainment sphere weigh in, citing parallels between the wrestling industry's handling of abuse and other high-profile cases in sports and Hollywood. The viral nature of these discussions amplifies the pressure on WWE's leadership to act decisively, lest they be castigated for hypocrisy and moral cowardice.